My name is Daniel Croft. I turned 65 last Wednesday. I spent 31 years working for Larkwell Financial Services, most of them inside a fourth-floor office that always smelled like old carpet, printer toner, and stale coffee. The kind of place where you hang your coat on the back of your chair, not because you plan to stay long, but because you don't plan to leave. And I didn't plan to leave. Not like that. I had 3 days left. 3 days until the official retirement luncheon, until the handshake from upper management, the framed certificate, the cake from the break room, the pension I'd earned over 3 decades of showing up on time, never calling in sick, never taking more vacation than I was owed. And then he called me into his office. Ethan Lang, 38 years old. Wears loafers that cost more than my first car. The kind of guy who calls his employees team, but never learns their last names. He'd been brought in 2 years ago as part of a restructuring initiative. He never liked me, probably because I reminded him of what he couldn't automate. "Dan," he said, without looking up from his MacBook, "we're making some changes." He said it like he was rearranging furniture, not gutting a man's life. "We're letting you go, effective immediately." I just stared at him. 3 days, I said. "I've got 3 days left." He didn't even blink, just scrolled through something on his screen and said, "It's not personal. This is about the future of the company. Leaner, more agile. You understand, I'm sure." I didn't, but I nodded anyway. I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry, didn't throw a chair. That's not who I am. I stood there in that office, sunlight spilling through the windows, and I realized I'd just been deleted from the life I helped build. He handed me a white envelope with my exit documents. That's what he called them. Not termination, not severance, just exit. Like I was stepping off a bus. No pension, no COBRA. Just my name typed in small black letters and a line of legalese explaining that I was being dismissed due to redundancy. That word hurt more than I expected. They had my replacement already. A 24-year-old named Brennan with a fade haircut and a marketing degree. Nice enough kid. Asked me last week how fax machines worked. I trained him without complaint. I smiled when he called me sir. I even gave him my handwritten binder, the one filled with little tricks I'd learned over 30 years of cleaning up accounting messes the software didn't catch. And now he had my job, and I had nothing. I rode the elevator down to the parking garage for the last time. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't want their sympathy. I didn't want their forced hugs or their shocked gasps. I just wanted to leave before I broke. But as I reached for my car door, something shifted. A stillness. Not rage, not grief, precision. Because suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I went home and opened a drawer in my garage I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a brown envelope, thick with documents I'd saved from every year of employment. Contracts, pension statements, internal memos, every update to Larkwell's benefits policy since 1992. My wife used to laugh at my hoarding. "You're like your father," she'd say. "You save receipts for paper clips." But she wasn't laughing now. She was gone. Passed away 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer. I'd used my vacation time for hospital visits, slept in chairs beside her bed, and Larkwell's HR had called to say I'd exceeded the allowable bereavement window. I didn't forget that. Ethan hadn't even been hired yet. But I remembered. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and 31 years of paperwork. I read through every clause about retirement, and one sentence stood out like a flare in the dark. "Retirement benefits shall be granted to all employees in good standing who complete 30 years of service or reach 65 years of age." I had both, which meant they weren't letting me go. They were cutting me out. 3 days before I could claim what they owed me. So I called someone who would understand. Her name was Grace Tomlin. She'd worked HR at Larkwell for 19 years before quitting last year. said the new management was playing fast and loose with employee policy. Grace picked up on the second ring. Dan, she said, I heard what they did. If you've stuck with me this far, and you're feeling the weight of what's coming, take a moment and subscribe. There's more to this story, and you won't want to miss what happens next. I told Grace everything, about the termination, about the pension clause, about Ethan's blank stare and smooth voice. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You kept your contracts? Everyone. Good. I've got a lawyer. You're going to need him. I'm not trying to sue, I said. I just want what I earned. She laughed, but not because it was funny. You think this is about fairness? Dan, they've been doing this to people for 6 months. You're just the one with the best paper trail. I asked her how many. 6 that I know of, she said, all within a month of qualifying for full retirement. All told, it was restructuring. Sound familiar? It did, and it made my hands curl into fists. I told her I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to protest. I just want to have lunch with him, I said. Ethan, one last lunch. Call it a goodbye. Dan, don't worry, it'll be memorable, that's all. The lawyer Grace connected me with was named Andrew Kessler. Mid-40s, wore suspenders, and didn't smile much, which I appreciated. Smiling lawyers make me nervous. We met in a corner booth at a quiet diner just off Route 17. I brought 2 folders, one with copies of my employment documents, and one with the original hard copies I hadn't let leave my sight in 20 years. He didn't even touch his coffee, just flipped through the files like a surgeon studying a scan before the operation. After 15 minutes of silence, he closed the last folder and said, They're done. I raised an eyebrow. Not just wrong, Dan. What they did? That's benefits fraud. You're 65. You crossed every threshold in their policy. They can't just terminate you 3 days before retirement and deny your pension. That's like pulling the finish line away mid-stride. Then why do it? I asked. Kessler leaned forward. Because they think you won't fight. You're older, alone, not corporate. They bet you'd go quietly. He paused. But now they've got a problem. What kind? You. Grace called the next morning. She'd spoken to 2 other retirees who'd had similar early dismissals just before their benefits were set to kick in. One of them, Carl Simmons, 62, had filed a complaint with HR, but was told the company was acting within policy and had consulted outside counsel. That outside counsel? Same firm representing Larkwell now. Same firm that Andrew Kessler had beat in court twice before. I told him I didn't want to go nuclear. No lawsuits if I could avoid them. No scandal. I just want my pension, I said. Kessler nodded. Then let me start quiet. A letter. Formal. And you? He smiled, just barely. You said something about lunch? I waited 2 days before reaching out to Ethan. Sent him a short, polite email. Hi, Ethan. I wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to work under your leadership these last couple years. No hard feelings. I know how these things go. But I'd like to invite you to a lunch this Friday. My treat. Just a quiet thank you for the memories. No tricks. Just closure. Hope you'll accept. Dan, he replied within an hour. Of course, Dan. Appreciate the graciousness. Let's do it. Ethan. Of course, he accepted. Narcissists love graceful exits. That gave me time to set the table, literally and metaphorically. Kessler had drafted a demand letter outlining the company's violation of their own retirement policy, attached with a 36-page exhibit. My offer letter. Every performance review. All positive. The original pension policy, plus screenshots of the updated employee handbook I'd saved from 2004, 2009, and 2017. Larkwell's current HR director, a woman named Fiona Langley, had signed off on the most recent version, confirming in a quarterly update that retirement eligibility remained based on age or service years, whichever came first. Ethan's mistake? He assumed I hadn't been paying attention. But I've always been a man of details. Details built bridges, balanced budgets. And now, they'd break him. If you're feeling that slow, satisfying burn of justice in motion, take a second and subscribe. Part 3 is where this lunch turns into something Ethan Lang will never forget. Friday came. I chose a quiet Italian place, a family-run spot I knew well, tucked between an antique store and a florist. The kind of place where you could still get a good lasagna for under $12 and a glass of house red that didn't taste like vinegar. Ethan showed up late. Of course, designer suit, Rolex, no tie, the kind of casual arrogance that doesn't even pretend to mask itself. He shook my hand like he was greeting an old client, not a man he'd thrown away like a used napkin. "Dan," he said, "you're taking this better than most." I respect that. I smiled. I've had practice. You know how many bosses I've seen come and go since '92? He laughed, flagging the waiter over. I let him order first. Something with grilled octopus and imported olives. I just ordered the house special. When the waiter left, I leaned in, folded my napkin, and said, "You know, Ethan, there's something I've been meaning to give you." "Oh?" he said, sipping his wine. I reached into my satchel and handed him a single manila envelope. Not thick, not aggressive, just enough weight to make him curious. He opened it, read the top page, paused, read it again, and that's when the color started to drain from his face. Inside the envelope, Kessler's letter of demand, an affidavit affirming my years of service and age eligibility, a formal notice of potential civil and criminal breach, and a footnote detailing the names of 2 other former employees ready to testify on record. If needed, Ethan looked up, his jaw clenched. "I don't think you understand what you're doing here," he said quietly. "No," I said. "I think I understand exactly what I'm doing. I gave this company 31 years. I helped build the system you just tried to cheat me out of. And now I'm giving you a choice." He said nothing. "Option 1, I continued. You reinstate my pension immediately. No games, no excuses. I walk away quietly. You get to keep your suit and your promotion." He narrowed his eyes. "And option 2? I leaned back. "Option 2 is me not being quiet anymore." He didn't finish his octopus. I did finish my lasagna. By the time the check came, Ethan had excused himself for a quick call. When he came back, he looked pale, shaken. We'll talk Monday," he muttered. "I'll review the letter." I nodded. "Do that." He didn't shake my hand this time, just walked out into the bright afternoon sun like a man who had finally realized he wasn't bulletproof. Monday morning arrived like thunder wrapped in silence. I didn't go to the office, of course. I wasn't welcome there anymore. But the building still haunted me, not because I missed it, but because I'd built it. Not the walls, maybe, but the systems, the standards, the legacy. And I knew it was about to come crashing down, not with drama, not with fire, but with paperwork, quietly signed by hands that had forgotten who'd made the lights stay on. At 10:04 a.m., Andrew Kessler called. He was chuckling. Not gloating, just amused. The way a man chuckles when he sees a trap spring exactly the way it was designed. "You'll love this," he said. "I just got off the phone with Larkwell's outside counsel. They'd like to resolve this matter discreetly." I waited. They've offered full pension restoration, retroactive to Friday, including healthcare continuation and back calculation for 3 other affected employees. I raised my eyebrows. That was fast. Kessler's voice sharpened. Too fast. Which tells me there's something else. "What do you mean?" "I mean they're scared. Ethan didn't just violate policy. He may have falsified internal documentation. If that's true, it's not just fraud, it's malice. That word stayed with me. Malice. As if I'd been deliberately removed not because I was old or redundant, but because he wanted to send a message. No more old guard. No more reminders of how the company used to work. Just sleek, young efficiency with no room for men like me. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at my lawn, thinking about the day I first joined Larkwell. Back then, it was 3 offices above a pizzeria. The printer jammed every other day. I used to fix it myself with a bent paperclip and a screwdriver I kept in my briefcase. No one else knew how. And now, they'd built an empire on systems I'd helped design and tossed me out like a crumpled sticky note. But that sticky note, it still had teeth. Around 2:30 that afternoon, Grace called. Her voice was tight, like a wire stretched too far. "You're going to want to see this," she said. She forwarded me a memo, internal, confidential, that one of her old contacts had slipped to her inbox. No subject line, just a timestamp. From Ethan Lang to Fiona Langley. HR. Subject. RE. Dan Croft. Let's scrub his record down to 29 years, 11 months. Call it a clerical overlap. Don't flag it unless someone asks. No payout. He's quiet. He'll go. And if he doesn't, we'll say it was an HR mistake. He doesn't have the fight left in him. I read it twice, then a third time. And then I laughed, loud and long and bitter, because Ethan had just put everything in writing. I called Kessler. He didn't laugh this time. "This is the nail in the coffin," he said. "They knew. They didn't miscalculate. They fabricated. That's intentional fraud, Dan. What happens now? I send this to the Department of Labor and wait for the first subpoena to drop. And Ethan," Kessler paused, "he won't survive this." 2 days later, I got a voicemail from Ethan. No greeting. Just, "Dan, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Look, I've spoken to legal, and they're willing to extend your pension benefits, okay? As a goodwill gesture. But I need you to sign something first. A non-disclosure agreement. Strictly procedural." I played it twice, then deleted it, and forwarded it to Kessler. Thursday morning, I walked past the Larkwell building on my way to the post office, and there he was. Ethan. Standing outside the glass doors, suit wrinkled, face pale, talking into a phone with the frantic energy of a man watching his career unravel in real time. He didn't see me, but I saw him, and I felt something unexpected. Pity. Because for all his power, all his arrogance, all his optimization, he never understood one simple truth. Don't bet against a man with nothing left to lose, especially not one with the receipts. The federal letterhead hit Larkwell like a thunderclap wrapped in silence. The Department of Labor launched a formal inquiry less than 48 hours after receiving Kessler's packet. The memo Ethan had sent, the one Grace forwarded to me, wasn't just unethical. It was evidence of calculated pension fraud. Not an HR error, not a paperwork mix-up. It was a cover-up. And it wasn't the first. 3 other former employees came forward within a week. All had similar stories. Fired just days or weeks before hitting retirement eligibility. All had incomplete or suspicious HR records. All had been told it was just business. And now, it was something else entirely. Something criminal. I didn't have to do much, just wait. Because when institutions crumble, they don't fall with a bang. They erode. One quiet leak, one loose file, one accidental forward at a time. Grace called to tell me that someone in the compliance department had handed over a second email chain, one between Ethan and the VP of Finance. It detailed a spreadsheet, a cost savings document labeled Senior Reduction Forecast, Q3 to Q1 Strategy. Underlined in red were 4 names. Mine was one of them. Next to it, $412,700 in projected pension plus healthcare savings. I wasn't a person to them. I was a budget line, an expendable expense. That Friday, Ethan didn't show up to work. HR said he was out on personal leave, but Grace's contact knew better. He's lawyering up, she told me. And Fiona Langley? She'd been placed on administrative review. Turns out the company's legal department had no idea she and Ethan had gone off script with the terminations. Worse, they'd altered internal timestamps to shorten employee tenure by just enough to dodge pension qualifications. When Grace read that part to me, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. I wasn't an exception. I was step 6 in a plan they'd run before. But this time, the plan hit a wall. Because this time, they fired the guy who kept everything. The following Tuesday, I received a formal written apology. Not from Ethan, from Larkwell's board of directors. They'd reviewed the evidence. They had deep concerns about the conduct of certain individuals and were initiating a top-down ethics audit. They offered to restore my pension. Retroactive. Full. Plus a $75,000 settlement for distress caused by mismanagement of internal policy. It was more than I'd asked for, but not more than I'd earned. Kessler advised me not to respond yet. Let them sweat, he said. Let them wonder if you're going public. That's what they fear most. He was right. Because the moment this hits the press, and it will, there'll be stock dips, board meetings, and more sleepless nights for men like Ethan Lang. Men who smiled while slicing others apart. Men who never imagined that someone quiet, someone methodical, someone like me, could take them down with a binder and a lunch bill. The last I heard of Ethan, he resigned, disgraced, without severance, without his bonus, without even a goodbye email. They quietly erased him from the company directory. No plaque, no farewell lunch. Just gone, like a smudge wiped off a whiteboard. I didn't gloat, didn't throw a party. I just sat on my porch the next morning with a cup of coffee, my pension officially restored, the sun cutting through the trees like it hadn't in years. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. Because I didn't win with noise. I won with truth. 3 months later, I stood in my garage, the radio humming softly, sawdust thick in the air. I was building a bench for my granddaughter's room. Maple, smooth grain, clean lines. No rush, no deadline. Just my hands, a chisel, and time I'd earned twice over. The settlement had cleared. $75,000 for distress. My full pension, backdated with interest. Lifetime health care. And a formal notarized letter from Larkwell's board admitting they'd violated their own retirement policy. It felt strange, seeing it in writing. All those years I'd spent writing reports, submitting proposals, fixing problems other people ignored. And now, here it was. An apology. One that cost them nearly $500,000 by the time the dust settled. Ethan, gone. Resigned under ethics review, then blacklisted quietly from the industry. The last whisper I heard, through Grace, was that he'd moved back to Chicago and taken a contract gig with a startup that wouldn't survive Q4. The corporate world forgets it's fallen fast. No one remembered his buzzwords anymore, just his mess. But me, I got remembered for something else entirely. The news broke 2 weeks after the settlement, a front-page feature in a financial ethics newsletter. They didn't name me, didn't need to. Everyone at Larkwell knew who Employee X was. Grace called and said, "They're calling you the guy who fired his boss with a lunch receipt." I laughed at that. Not because it was clever, but because it was true. Here's what I learned in the end. When they fired me, they thought they were erasing a cost, a line on a spreadsheet, a weight on their profit margin. But I wasn't just a cost. I was the one who knew where the wires ran, who trained the guy who kept the system running. I was the fingerprint on everything they built, the steady breath beneath the numbers, the one who'd never missed a day when the snow came down or the pipes froze. I was legacy. And legacy doesn't disappear just because someone signs your name off an office door. Last week, Brennan, the young guy who took my job, reached out. He asked if I'd grab coffee. Said he found my old binder. The one with the notes and fixes and the page on how to reboot the internal server when the breaker trips. I said sure. We met at a quiet place. He looked nervous. First thing he said, "I'm sorry." He didn't have to. He wasn't the problem. He was just born into a system that forgets how things got built. But I appreciated it all the same. We talked for an hour. He asked about the memo, about Ethan, about what it was like seeing it all fall apart. I told him the truth. "You never win anything by yelling," I said. "You win by knowing what matters and keeping records." He nodded, scribbled in a little notebook. Made me smile. Maybe he'll do better than Ethan. I hope so. I left the cafe feeling lighter than I had in years, not just because I got my retirement, but because I walked away with nothing left unsaid, nothing left undone. Some people think revenge is slamming a door, yelling, breaking something, making someone hurt. But the best kind of revenge is rebuilding, quietly, on your terms, while they watch their empire crumble under the weight of their shortcuts. I gave them 31 years, and in the end, they gave me back everything. Plus interest. Let me know if you'd like me to format this into a YouTube script with visual cues, narration breaks, background music suggestions, or if you're ready to move on to the next story idea.